I've said, and many others, including the managing director of the IMF, have said that our economy was doing well until COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. Was doing well until COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine took us off course. Mr. Speaker, I will be heard. Hansard has to record me. I will be heard. Maybe because of the severity of the present difficulties, or maybe because it suits their preconceived agenda, some people are unwilling to accept that we were on a good trajectory until the arrival of COVID-19. The Ghanaian people, however, accepted this proposition as evidenced in the results of the 2020 presidential election, which were unanimously endorsed and upheld by the 7-member panel of the Supreme Court. Mr. Speaker, allow me to go on a short trip down memory lane and remind ourselves what things look like back at the beginning of 2020, when I came to this House to give an account on the state of our nation. This is what I told this House on 20th February 2020, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, in 3 years, we have reduced inflation to its lowest level, 7.8% in January 2020, since 1992. For the first time in over 40 years, we've had a fiscal deficit below 5% of GDP for 3 years in a row. For the first time in over 20 years, the balance of trade, that is the difference between our exports and imports, has been in surplus for 3 consecutive years. Our current account deficit is shrinking, interest rates are declining, and the average annual rate of depreciation of the cedi, as it is lowest for any first-term government in the Fourth Republic. Our economic growth has rebounded to place Ghana among the fastest-growing economies in the world for 3 years in a row, at an annual average of 7% GDP growth, up from 3.4% in 2016, the lowest
Honourable
in nearly
members,
3
please,
decades.
may we listen in silence? Please, it's my duty to protect our guests, and I will do so without fear or favor.
The international investor community has recognized the development, resulting in Ghana today being the largest recipient of foreign direct investment in West Africa. The sovereign credit rating agencies have upgraded our ratings and also improved the outlook for this year, notwithstanding the fact that it is an election year, unquote. Mr. Speaker, that is where we were at the end of February 2020. 3 weeks after this speech, in which I expressed our sympathies and solidarity with China on the difficulties they were having with the new virus, our world changed. The virus I refer to arrived in our country and in the rest of the world with a vengeance. Within weeks, we were in the middle of a lockdown. Our airports and land borders were closed. Schools and factories and even markets were closed. The hospitality industry was brought to its knees. Our economy, like much of the rest of the world, went into a tailspin. There are legitimate questions being asked about how the country's debt situation got to where it is. Mr. Speaker, let me state emphatically that we have not been reckless in borrowing and in spending.
Honorable members, it's not yet your time to say. Wait until that time arrives. Please, honorable members, I will allow spontaneous reaction to statements, but I will not allow debate of the statement. Your Excellency, you may proceed.
It is worth noting that the debts we're serving were not only contracted during the period of this administration. Mr. Speaker, we have spent money on things that are urgent, to build roads and bridges and schools, to train our young people and equip them to face a competitive world. Considering the amount of work that still needs to be done on the state of our roads, the bridges that have to be built, considering the number of classrooms that need to be built, the furniture and equipment needs at all stages of education, considering the number of children who should be in school and are not, considering the number of towns and villages that still do not have access to potable water, I dare say no one can suggest we have overborrowed or spent recklessly. Yes, I've been in a hurry to get things done, and this includes massive developments in agriculture, education, health, irrigation, roads, rails, ports, airports, sea defense, digitization, social protection programs, industrialization, and tourism. We can be justifiably proud of the many things that we have managed to do in the past 6 years. As I go around the country, I hear the pleas for more roads, schools, hospitals, and as the rainy season comes, I wish, as every other Ghanaian does, that we would have built more drains than we have. And I wish we have the resources to do more. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the amount of work that we have done, especially in the road sector. Roads constitute the largest number of questions asked in this House by members of Parliament. A large amount of the monies we borrow are for road construction. Shall we dare stop constructing roads? Fund has been going since the announcement on 1st July 2022 of our intention to engage the IMF for a funded program. Mr. Speaker, having reached a staff-level agreement on 12 December 2022, after 5 months of intense negotiations and completion of most of the prior actions required under the agreement, we are on course for the IMF staff to present to the IMF Executive Board Ghana's program request for a $3 billion extended credit facility by the end of this month. Mr. Speaker, the 3-year IMF program, anchored on government's post-COVID-19 program for economic growth, aims at restoring macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability whilst protecting the vulnerable. It is a strong reform program which relies on front-loaded fiscal measures to increase domestic resource mobilization and streamline public expenditures to support inclusive growth and enhance social protection. Mr. Speaker, I thank the House for its support throughout this process, including the passage of key revenue laws. However, a few more of these measures, namely the Income Tax Amendment Bill, the excise duty and excise tax stamp amendment bills, as well as the growth and sustainability levy bill, are outstanding, which need the urgent attention of the House and passage to complete the prior actions. This will put us in readiness for our presentation to the Fund Board, and more importantly, bolster our domestic revenue mobilization efforts. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that given the extent of the fiscal and debt sustainability issue we are addressing, fiscal adjustments and structural reforms are not sufficient for restoration of debt sustainability. A critical component of the measures we are implementing to address the current economic crisis is the debt operation, involving both domestic debt and external debt. The debt operation is aimed at returning the country to debt sustainable path by 2028 by reducing the debt to GDP ratio on a general classification basis and in present value terms from 103% in 2022 to 55% by 2028, and reducing the external debt service to revenue ratio from 29% in 2022 to 18% by 2028. Mr. Speaker, in order to achieve these goals, the decision was taken to execute a domestic debt exchange program, in addition to fiscal adjustment, external debt operation, and structural reforms. The participation rate of 85%, representing tendered bonds of 83 billion cedis, out of the total eligible bonds of 97.7 billion cedis, constitutes significant success for the DDE program. The 83 billion cedis bonds that were successfully tendered also represent 64% of the outstanding domestic debt of 130 billion cedis at the end of December 2022. As pension funds have been expressly exempted from the DDEP. I want to take this opportunity to thank organized labor, pensioners, pension fund managers, the Ghana Association of Banks, the Ghana Securities Industry Association, the Ghana Insurance Association, the Individual Bondholders and Retirees Forum, and all others who have contributed to make the domestic debt exchange program a success. Mr. Speaker, I know it has been said over and over again in the past weeks, but the voluntary nature of the DDE program bears repeating, as is the fact that the government is committed to honoring all coupon payments and maturities in respect of both old bonds and the new bonds, in line with government fiscal commitments. Mr. Speaker, we're also making progress on the external debt negotiations since the government announced an external debt service suspension on 19 December 2022 for certain categories of external debt to ensure an orderly restructuring. This suspension is an interim emergency measure toward a comprehensive external debt operation which will contribute to the restoration of our debt sustainability in line with our request for debt treatment under the G20 Common Framework. I want to express our appreciation to members of the Paris Club and to the People's Republic of China for the cooperation they have so far exhibited to us in attempting to reach an agreement and in their attempt to establish an official credit committee. We look forward to their fast-tracking the needed financing assurances for IMF approval. We are confident that with their cooperation, we will reach our March deadline for going to the fund. We will remain resolute in our vision to restore macroeconomic stability and promote inclusive growth. Indeed, there were some who suggested that we cancel the national identification registration exercise and even postpone the 2020 general elections. Who would have thought that today, anybody will be questioning the fumigation of schools and markets. I recall vividly the straight talking I received from a group of our most eminent physicians and other scientists on the urgency of fumigating all public spaces, including offices, schools, hospitals, markets, churches, and mosques. The few who could afford it even fumigated their own homes. Today, the science might be that such measures make no difference to the spread of the virus, but criminality or reckless spending cannot be ascribed to the decision to undertake such measures. Mr. Speaker, you might remember that we could not produce Veronica buckets fast enough. Today, it is not an obligatory item on anyone's list of purchases. In dealing with the crisis generally, I did not meet anyone brave enough to suggest the considerations of money should be a hindrance to anything we needed to do in the fight against the virus. I was, and I am grateful that the people of Ghana rose to the occasion, and together we went through the crisis and came out well by defying the doomsday predictions about the inevitability of dead bodies on our streets. I'm grateful that we saw the wisdom in helping each other, and I thank those who contributed their expertise, time, and energy to the fight against the virus. And I thank those who contributed to the COVID-19 fund that was set up to help us meet some of the expenditures. The economic consequences from the pandemic have been devastating. Mr. Speaker, it is precisely because the economic fallout from the pandemic is so widespread and long-lasting that it is important to show clearly that the COVID-19 funds, were not misused. It is critical that we do not lose the confidence of the people that a crisis that they were led to believe we were all in together was abused for personal gain. Mr. Speaker, it was government that asked for the COVID funds to be audited, and I can assure this House that nothing dishonorable was done with the COVID funds. The responses from the Ministers for Health and Finance on January 23rd and 25th, 2023, respectfully, have sufficiently laid to rest the queries from the Auditor General's report, and I believe any objective scrutiny of these statements from the Health and Finance Ministries would justify this conclusion. We did provide 518 million cedis of grants and loans to micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises through the NBSSI, now the Ghana Enterprise Agency, in which 302,515 enterprises benefited, of which 60% were women-owned. These were MSMEs that were in distress as a result of the pandemic. For some traders, the receipt of 1,000 cedis made the difference between the ruin of the household and survival. In addition, 58,041 health workers were empowered to supplement the existing health sector workforce. Subsequently, all of them have been absorbed as permanent workers in the health sector. Frontline health workers were also granted 50% tax relief for the period. Was that something to regret? We should be ever grateful for the work that so many people did to keep all of us safe. All households enjoyed free water supply and huge discounts on electricity bills because access to water was a necessity to ensure people adhere to hygiene practices, and access to electricity was important as everybody was encouraged to stay at home. It also provided an economic cushion to protect lives and livelihoods at a time of difficulty. Today, the government's support for utility bills is being projected by some as a waste, or to use that word so beloved of some commentators, profligate. Mr. Speaker, the government took a deliberate decision to try and keep the inevitable disruptions across all our lives down to a minimum in the education sector by opening schools and education institutions as soon as it was made safe to do so. It was an expensive undertaking and not universally popular. But faced with the prospect of a whole generation of our children losing irreplaceable years of education, and the real likelihood of many of them dropping out of school, however, forever, we took the brave decision to open the institutions. Even then, it is worth pointing out that the school year has not yet fully returned to the predictable pre-COVID calendar. After the event, some might be tempted to forget the volumes of sanitizer and other logistics it took to keep the schools open and safe. In much the same way as some might now choose to forget the vitriol that came from some who should have known better, threatening hell and damnation when, according to them, the children start dying in the schools. Mercifully, we did not lose a single child to COVID in school. I would like to suggest that with the best will in the world, Mr. Speaker, no auditor can put a figure on the cost of keeping the children in school safely during that crisis, nor the continuing cost of the effect of the pandemic on our young children. Not the financial cost, not the emotional cost, and certainly not the social cost. But we must thank the Almighty that we have survived to repair the damage and begin to rebuild our economy. Mr. Speaker, concluding the arrangements with the fund will not restore our fortunes overnight, but it will set us on the road to recovery. With fiscal discipline, we'll regain the trust and confidence of our business partners and the investor community, which will give us space to continue our productive plans and policies. However, in addition to our engagement with the fund, we're also seeking and implementing some original and innovative ideas to try to solve our problems. For example, the gold purchase program by the Bank of Ghana and the gold for oil policy are creative uses of our resources, which are already bearing fruit. These policies are aimed at achieving two results that are critical to the health of our economy. Firstly, they will help us preserve foreign exchange, especially the US dollar. And secondly, they will enable us to stabilize the price of oil products, such as petrol and diesel, on the domestic market. We have already seen some success on both fronts, with the price of US dollars and petroleum products falling since we announced the policy and began to implement it. The average price of petrol at the pump, which had risen to 20 cedis a litre in the middle of December 2022, is now 13 cedis and 80 pesos a litre. The price of diesel had risen to more than 23 cedis and 70 pesos a litre, and is now selling on the average at 13 cedis and 80 pesos a litre, which is a reduction of almost 10 cedis a litre. We expect this trend of falling fuel prices to reflect soon in our daily lives, since transport fares affect the price of everything. I hope the trend of prices going up and coming down become a regular feature of our retail economy as being demonstrated in the fuel prices. Because as we all know, prices, especially of petroleum products, used only to go up in our country. Roads constitute the largest number of questions asked in this House by members of Parliament. A large amount of the monies we borrow are for road construction. Shall we dare stop constructing roads? Mr. Speaker, I would like to state categorically that this government has built more roads than any government in the history of the Fourth Republic. And Mr. Speaker, the details of all these roads are attached in the annex to this message. I have done so because last year when I made a similar pronouncement, I was met with howls and gasps of incredulity from the minority benches. And so I thought it appropriate this time to present it as an annex to the statement. Which will be part of Hansa. Beyond the construction of roads, Mr. Speaker, this MPP administration has implemented successfully a national identification system with the Ghana card, constructed more railways than any government in the Fourth Republic, established the Zongo Development Fund to address the needs of Zongo and inner city communities. And under their auspices, we have conducted more infrastructure in the Zongo communities than any other government in the Fourth Republic. Constructed more NCA licensed fiber optic cable than any other government in the Fourth Republic. 90%, 93% of the total. Increase the proportion of the population with access to toilet facilities from 33% to 59%. Increase the number of public libraries from 61 from independence until 2017 to 115 in 2022. Provided more equipment, vehicles, ammunition, etc. to security services than any other government in the Fourth Republic. We have successfully implemented the digital address system, improved significantly the financing of governance and anti-corruption institutions like the Ministry of Justice and Office of the Attorney General, the National Commission for Civic Education, SRAJ, EYOCO, and the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Implemented the One District, One Factory initiative. In 4 years, 106 companies are in operation under 1D, 1F. 148 factories are under construction. This is the largest expansion of that sector since independence. Constructed more fish landing sites than any other government in the Fourth Republic. Established Africa's first national-scale electronic pharmacy platform. Provided free Wi-Fi to 700 senior high schools, 46 colleges of education, 260 district education offices, an initial successful pilot of 13 public universities. Introduced drones in the delivery of critical medicine, vaccines, and blood to people in remote parts of the country. And today, Ghana has the largest medical drone delivery service in the world. with zipline distribution centers in Ominako, Mpenya, Vobsi, Sefirioso, Ketekrachi, and Enum, and overseen an improvement in revenue collection with the introduction of an e-VAT and e-invoicing system. For example, figures from 19 tax-paying companies onboarded onto the e-VAT system reveal total recorded monthly sales increasing from 222 million CDs in November 2021 to 720 million CDs in November 2022. Again, in December 2021, total monthly sales of 284 million CDs also saw a huge increase to 1 billion CDs in December 2022. Indeed, the evidence of how state funds have been used to improve our society is all over the country. No district or constituency has been left out. And I believe there are many Ghanaians who will vehemently disagree when some say there's nothing to show for all the funds that have been at my government's disposal.